I'm Dennis Ariola, President and CEO of SoCalGas. For over 140 years, we've been delivering energy to the communities we serve. We're proud to support the 30th anniversary of AirTalk with Larry Mantle, and we congratulate Southern California Public Radio for delivering the highest quality news and information. Thank you for your commitment to the diverse communities of Southern California.
Good evening, everyone. Let's try that again. Good evening. We got a great packed house here, and we're looking forward to translating that into the excitement that people can hear on the radio. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Colin Campbell from KPCC. We're just about halfway through the AirTalk 30th anniversary tour of Southern California. It's been such a great year. We've been to Rancho Mirage and Pasadena, and next month we'll be up in Santa Barbara talking about desalination and some of the decisions about there, something Orange County knows a lot about. We're looking at that as kind of a way to address the drought. So it'll be a phenomenal program, and we're so proud of these programs and so proud of KPCC and AirTalk now doing this for 30 years. Larry Mantle diving into the critical issues of the moment. It does make Larry the longest serving public affairs talk show host in Southern California, which is a great distinction. And when you see him on stage tonight, he'll look tired. He'll look inches from retirement. He'll look so bored. No, I'm just joking. He's as excited to do this as ever. And what a panel tonight. We're so excited about this. The producers have been working so hard. These are people you don't often see in the same room together digging into these issues. So we're so glad you came. This tour is brought to you by the generous support of SoCalGas, so I want to acknowledge that. If you are a social media person tonight and you're tweeting, we use the hashtag AT30, and you can tweet and follow AirTalk on Twitter, which is a great way to keep up with the show. The other thing that I just wanted to mention tonight is we have something called the Public Insight Network, which is a great way to become a source for KPCC. And this may sound like a crazy thing, but we have about 60,000 people, I think, in this PIN network now, and if you feel like you own an issue in your community, or if you have intelligence you can share with reporters, or tips, or things that you want to talk about, or things, if you know about something and a reporter can reach out to you, it's great to become a part of this network. And Ashley Alvarado, who you'll see sitting on the edge of the desk here, is one of the PIN community managers, and she does a phenomenal job and is constantly connecting the news of the day with people who we don't often get to, who know about these issues. So please check in with Ashley and become a part of the PIN network if you can. So thank you again so much for coming. With no further ado, I will introduce Larry Mantle.
Thank you so much. It's great to have you here tonight. I heard John Cohn is the head of our public events like this. We had nearly 400 people try to respond to come tonight, so you are one of 150 we were able to accommodate. So we're delighted to be here at the Discovery Cube, but it shows how much people in this community care about what happens here, and your enthusiasm for what's happening in Central Orange County, your support of AirTalk and KPCC means so much to all of us. So I can't tell you how heartening it is to come to a community like Santa Ana, to see so many of you here. Some of you I know drove, through very heavy traffic to get here, and were really motivated to do it. So I see the nods. Thank you. Thank you for doing that so much. So what we're going to do is record a radio show. I mean, it's live to tape. In other words, what you're going to hear tonight will not be edited, save some major technical glitch, which because of our great engineering team never happens. But everything is going to be done what we call live to tape. So as you hear it tonight, you'll be hearing it tomorrow should you tune in at noon on KPCC. This will be our second hour of the program. There'll be an opportunity for you to take part in the conversation, potentially, if you're interested. There are index cards that hopefully you have if you're interested in potentially asking a question. And what you can do is just write down as succinctly as possible what your question is. And I'm sorry we can't do comments. It's just got to be something that's going to kind of further the conversation with a question, succinctly, and one that you think, it isn't just something you're curious about, but you think in your conversations with others, they're going to be too. So I'd ask you just not, well, I have a store and it's, such and such, but something, those of us that are, business people down in the heart of downtown, this is something we as a group experience. What about? So to make it a little broader, a little more general. We'll collect those cards right at the first break of the program, and our producers will start going through, and we'll just try and see, avoid duplicates and find the ones that we think are going to most connect with a larger listening audience. Now, one thing, once we actually start with the broadcast, it adds tremendous energy for the listeners on radio for you to respond with the enthusiasm that brought you out tonight. So I'll give you a little cue. There's no applause sign or anything. It's public radio. We don't do that. I could hold up a Post-it note, but I'll give you a little cue in the opening of it, and if you feel inspired to applaud and show your enthusiasm, it gives great energy and lets the listener know, oh, this is a special show. There's a live audience. So anyway, thanks very much. Without any further delay, let me introduce our guests who are going to be taking part. I'll then reintroduce them, of course, for the radio listeners, but it's a chance for you just to greet them as they come in, the folks that were kind enough to agree to come join us. First of all, a gentleman I had the pleasure for many years of working with on AirTalk. He was a regular contributor to our Orange County Roundtable. He's now a contributor for KCRW, Our Loss, Their Gain. He's editor of the OC Weekly, Gustavo Arellano. Gustavo. Also with us is the president of Downtown Inc., nonprofit business improvement district. He is a developer who, he and his family for years have been developing in downtown Santa Ana, Ryan Chase. Our next guest he's really the history mind for our conversation. He is associate professor at Cal State Fullerton, just up the road. He's a professor of Chicana and Chicano studies. He has a book that's coming out that is related to the very topic we're speaking about. It's called The Latino City, Urban Revitalization, Politics and Grassroots. Erwaldo Gonzalez. And then next, our lone official City of Santa Ana representative, but he'll be there to talk with us about city policies and the city's perspective on a number of issues, as well as his personal views. He is executive director of the Planning and Building Agency for the city, Hassan Haghani. And next we have a voice of residents in one of the historic neighborhoods here in Santa Ana. It's the Floral Park neighborhood. Community leader Mark McLaughlin. Also with us, she is an artist herself and the co-founder of the Santa Ana Community Artists Coalition, Alicia Rojas. And rounding out our panel, the campaign coordinator for Santa Ana Building Healthy Communities, which is advocated for a wellness corridor here in the city of Santa Ana, Ana Siria Urzua. All right, I think we've got our our mics here, almost all in position. And I've encouraged our panelists to be freewheeling and to jump in and insert themselves, and we'll get a lively conversation going, because with something like this that really has to do with community identity, you know, there's no right or wrong answers. There's you know, nothing can be cut and dried about this. It is messy, it's interesting, and it speaks to people's very individual perceptions of their community. And all of our guests obviously value this community a great deal and care about it, but you're going to hear, I'm sure, a wide range of points of view. All right, we're just about set to start. Dave, once we are good to go. All right, very good. From the Discovery Cube Science Center in Santa Ana, this is AirTalk on the Road. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary with monthly broadcasts from all over Southern California. We're here in Central Orange County to talk about one of the most interesting cities in our region. Santa Ana is the second largest city in Orange County. It's the county seat and home of the largest percentage of Latino residents of any city in California, nearly 80%. 10 years ago, we were in town to talk about the conflict over redeveloping downtown. Well, we're back, and I'm glad everything's been resolved. So all it took was 10. But you know, seriously, the longer I host the show, the more I realize the topics just keep going around and around, cycling over and over, with the exception of smog alerts. That's one thing we seem to have resolved. But we're here to talk about Santa Ana's identity, and it's not alone in our region in trying to figure out who are we as a city and what do we want to represent ourselves as to the broader Southern California community. Now, what makes it particularly gripping and poignant here is that planning, zoning, and business incentives smack right into the question of cultural identity for the city. Should the city lead with Mexican culture, given that nearly half of the population was not born in the United States, and by far the largest percentage of that half of the city was born in Mexico? Spanish is dominant language in the city of Santa Ana. Is that how the city should lead, or does that confine the city's ability to attract spending from multicultural, younger residents for whom they're experiencing all different cultures? And what about those from outside town who might pump money into the Santa Ana economy? Well, we begin with Gustavo Arellano, editor of the OC Weekly, contributor to KCRW Radio. Gustavo, great to have you with us. Appreciate it so much.
Gracias for having me, Larry, and congratulations on 30 years of raising intellectual desmadre.
Thank you.
Good man.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And congratulations on the OC Weekly's 20th anniversary. That's
next week.
That's
Pick up
terrific. Congratulations. So set the scene for us. What do you see as the central challenge as Santa Ana tries to determine who are we?
The most important thing for Santana that it has to deal with is that the rest of Orange County thinks of it not only as a joke, but as an aberration. You look at, online comments on letters to the editor. Over the past 30, even 40 years, Santana is code for crime. Santana is code for poverty. More importantly, Santana is code for Mexican. And of course, in Orange County, Mexican, it's like being the devil. I'm not saying I agree with any of it. Far from it. I've always thought Santana was I'm from Anaheim, but Santana is the best city. You always have to throw that in. Santana is the best city in Orange County. It has amazing culture, amazing people, the activists, the restaurants, all of that stuff. So the problem with that, though, is this identity crisis that Santa Ana officials and some Santa Ana residents have, and they're trying to appeal, like, oh, we don't want to be seen as that Santa Ana. We want to be seen as this new Santa Ana. And my big issue has always been, like, be comfortable with who you are. It's okay to change and all that, but be comfortable with who you are. And as long as you have that problem of being uncomfortable with that, there's always going to be issues.
Well, the challenge, though, I would think, isn't just to be who you are, but who you think you're going to be 10 and 20 years from now. Because now it is a heavily immigrant population that's here, but they're going to have kids that are born in the United States. They're going to be exposed to much broader cultural references. They'll probably be higher income than their parents on average. No guarantee, but likely. So can the city do both? Can it say, here's who we are today, here's the kind of shopping we have to have, the kinds of community resources, but here's what we've got to be looking to?
That's been the big issue here for the past 20 years. And I think it can happen, but it has to happen organically. With the city, I'm talking about the city officials over the past 20 years, they've tried to jerry-rig, basically, all sorts of different initiatives. You had a Renaissance plan back, 2007 or so forth. We used to talk about it on your show quite often. You had the Artist Village back in the mid-1990s. Now there's some plans to build a light rail system. So you're doing all these things. The city is spending all this money, millions of dollars really, on a very specific area of Santana, which is a downtown. But Santana is more than downtown. Meanwhile, you have other areas of the city not getting that same attention as the downtown is getting. And I get it. City officials, that's your marquee. That's what's going to bring people in. But you can't take care of one little section and ignore the rest of the city.
So why do you think that happens?
Well, come on. The middle of the city, that's where you can attract a multicultural people from outside. The rest of the city, for the most part, is heavily immigrant, mostly Mexican, working class, and it's not kosher for city officials. City officials do not want to be known as a working class city. They want to be the next Whittier. They want to be the next, West Covina. Is that a cool city? I forget. But again, and those cities are fine at all.
Yeah.
But first you have to have, you should be proud of who you are. And then I think that when you have those it's a psychosis in the minds of city officials. Nothing against Hassan right now, but this is something that's predating you 20 years, 25 years.
All right, let me bring into the conversation Ryan Chase, whose family roots in Santa Ana go back to 1910, is that?
1919.
1919.
Correct.
So your family's been here a very long time. Your developer, your East End shopping area features restaurants, shops that are attracting locals and non-Santa Ana residents. President of the Business Booster Group, Downtown Inc. Appreciate your being here. So
Absolutely.
your family developed the Fiesta Marketplace right down on 4th Street. And, how does that and the challenges of that project factor in to Santa Ana's current state of trying to develop downtown?
Sure. I think it's important to note my father and my late grandfather, who passed away recently, they both developed Fiesta Marketplace in the mid-1980s to really target that immigrant customer that was coming over in huge numbers. And that project was one of the first, I would say, mixed-use projects in the country geared towards the Latino demographic, and was heavily successful to the point where we were getting higher rents than some of our properties we have in, say, Newport or Irvine. That being said, about, call it 10 or so years ago, we started to notice a decline in revenues. We started to see an increase in vacancy, and we started to see some challenges with some of our retailers. We have a pretty good relationship with most of our retailers, and we speak to them on a pretty consistent basis, and they started to put up some red flags that things were happening. And
so what is this the big box effect that was?
Well, I think there's a few factors involved. We talked to several people kind of in the trenches, if you will, that are serving the Latino customer and demographic. We have some relationships with Norte Gonzalez Market and Annan's Linens and some others, and kind of wanted to see what they were seeing, and they kind of saw the same thing we were seeing. Was really, frankly, corporate America figured it out. Latino demographic is the biggest growing demographic in the country. They have huge disposable incomes, huge families, loyal customers. Who wouldn't want them? And for a long time, 4th Street in downtown Santa Ana, or Broadway in downtown LA, for example, or more regional, Latino shopping areas, have figured out that they can go elsewhere now. I mean, even Main Place Mall or Westfield Mall behind us, which 20 years ago was probably heavily Anglo, is now heavily Latino. So you've seen a fundamental shift in shopping patterns. So frankly, for us, we had to make a decision of what to do. And I've always been taught in business, if you don't adapt, you don't survive. And so we looked around the rest of the country and kind of what was happening in other downtowns and other emerging areas, and really figured we had to become more of a destination to survive. The reality is the businesses that were there were not doing as well as they'd done in the past. And again, as a developer or as an investor, we had to protect our investment.
So with the new businesses you have in East End, what is the demographic there? Do you have a sense of how many of them live in Santa Ana or come from outside, and the ethnic composition of your customers?
Sure. In terms of the actual tenants that we have, I would say that more than half are Latino, but they're second and third generation. So I know that there's even been an argument against that they're not immigrant Latinos, they're second and third generation, which I think, frankly, a lot of this is a generational dilemma versus a racial dilemma. And what was the other
Oh,
part?
it is about inside Santa Ana
Sure, and in
versus...
terms of the tenants are people that we're attracting, I would say we're getting a heavy mix of Latino and Asian customers, as well as we're pulling from, frankly, everywhere. And really, a lot of it depends on who the tenant is and what they're doing. For example, I've really tried to attract more what I would call destination-oriented entertainment and destination-oriented retail and food. So it's one of those things where you look at the end of the day, there's so much competition out there. There's so many malls. There's so many strip centers. Why is someone going to come to Santa Ana? They're going to come to Santa Ana because it's different, it's unique, it's got something to offer that other places don't have. So, for example, the Frida Cinema or the Yost Theater, these are places that are offering things that, again, you're not going to find other parts of the county or maybe even other parts of Southern California.
So then, of course, the question is, with people coming in from outside and the Mexican-specific businesses that were there, in taking those away, have the big boxes been able to fully fill the void, or is something missing? Are some of these very culturally specific kinds of stores, things that Walmart might not carry, Target might not carry, are residents here able to get that stuff?
I think that's a tough question. I mean, I think the reality is as we discovered, a lot of the businesses down there just weren't doing well, and the reality is it's hard to compete with the big boxes. I think if there's unique destination retail that is offering something different that Walmart or the mall doesn't offer, then sure, they could do fine down there, like anyone else could do. But in terms of trying to compete with Walmart, and we had an example, a guy that sold jeans, and I said to him, I said, Brian, you sell jeans, how much do you pay for them? What are you charging for them? And how big of a selection do you have? Because I said the reality is someone can go to Walmart, they have 20 more options than you have, they can park for free, they have a food court there, they have public restrooms, you know, there's a lot more of I guess, opportunities or benefits to go in elsewhere. So if they're going to come to you, they're going to come to you for something different. And the reality is if you're selling the same jeans the guy down the street selling, and you can buy them somewhere cheaper, why are they going to come to you? And the reality is the buying power that a guy like Brian has compared to Walmart are not even comparable.
Yeah, just quickly, Gustavo, do you take issue with that characterization?
Well, you're always going to have different tenants coming and going. Like the big issue I think that a lot of people, especially activists in downtown Santa Ana, had was the Chases, God bless them, they're landlords, so the most important color for them is green, for better or for worse. But they rented to these tenants for 20, 25 years, and then after a while, you know, they're like, okay, maybe it's no longer as profitable to have them. They're not making the money anymore. And then there was a point, and maybe Ryan could correct me, but there was a point where it was saying that they were going to the tenant and say, okay, you're going to have to now appeal to a bilingual audience, not just a Mexican-only audience. For me personally, it'd be nice to have a little bit more respect for these people that you're renting for, or we're giving you money for 25 years. That's just, again, I'm not a landlord. I don't know how to make money. Ryan does.
Sure,
So,
and I think there's a little more to kind of clarify on the story. One thing is from a rental standpoint, you know, obviously as an investor, you get an NOI or net operating income on your property. Well, our net operating income had got cut in half. So we were doing about $500,000 a year in annual rent, and it went to $250,000. So we had an economic reality we had to deal with. I think it's also important to note that I would say a good 75% of our tenants were on rent reductions, or we were floating them personally. Some of them were giving loans to. Some of them were doing some very creative and unique things to try to help them survive. You're absolutely right that looking back, we probably should have not have gone to them and said anything, except we're the landlord and, you know, you're not working out here, we're going to bring someone else in. But we tried to do the right thing and go to people and say, look, obviously what's happening down here is changing. We want to adapt to try to, you know, attract a wide-ranging demographic, which frankly I think is reflective of Orange County as a more wide range of people, diversity. Downtowns are meant to be melting pots and welcoming to all, and that was kind of the goal we were trying to get to. But I think regardless of kind of what happened in the past, the reality is the economic reality on the ground, and market forces dictate what's happening. And you know, if you look downtown Santa Ana today, a lot of businesses are thriving and others aren't. And I mean, it kind of speaks for itself.
Ryan Chase, whose family been developers here in Santa Ana for decades. Also with us, Gustavo Arellano, editor of the OC Weekly, contributor KCRW Radio. Coming up, we have many more guests who are going to be sharing their perspectives about Santa Ana, the city's future, the identity of Santa Ana versus its efforts to attract from outside the city itself. We'll continue from the Discovery Cube in Santa Ana right after this news update.
Sure.
Radio is tough.
Yes. Okay.
Radio is tough. Keep it to the time.
If you have a question that you've already filled out, you're really prompt and on it, if you want to send your question to the aisle, we'll pick them up there. Lauren, our senior producer, will grab any question cards that you might have.
You have a good flow.
Thank you.
And we'll be able to take some more at the next break as well. So
Best dressed, right?
this isn't your one and only chance. Anybody
is-
need a card who didn't get one? No? Okay.
What TV's missing with those socks, right?
Oh, that's great.
Happy socks.
All set, Dave?
Downtown.
That's a good.
I don't know, how many of you have actually had a chance to come and visit the Discovery Center here? Just show of hands. It's great. It's terrific. I've never been here before. My son has been here, but I've never been here. What a great place, and with the expansion, very impressive. I was sitting in the little prep room where I was going over my final preparation and notes, and there's a little sign outside it display. What is friction? And my immediate thought is, let's make a good talk segment.
You might
Forget physics. It's
you might need to get your
Friction.
physics book out.
yeah, right, yeah.
Definitely.
So I don't have any names on any of these questions yet, and if you want to ask your question, we're going to need to call your name from the audience. So if you left a question,
Anonymous.
if you're the midst of writing the question, please put your name on it.
Seething in Santana.
Great.
Or sweet. Sweet
Wrote
in
a
Santana.
question.
All right, Dave, we're about ready to go? All right. And Lauren, you got the clock? We're all, okay. From the Discovery Cube Science Center in Santa Ana, this is AirTalk on the Road. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary with broadcasts all over Southern California. Next month, we will be in Santa Barbara. So I hope you can come up and join us, because that's where our newest transmitter is. We'll have to see how many listeners we have out there who turn out tonight. It is a packed house in Santa Ana at the Discovery Center. Great to be here in central Orange County to talk about the important issues about Santa Ana's identity, a challenge that cities throughout Southern California are undertaking, because even cities far smaller than Santa Ana that you would think would be more homogenous have a hard time, presenting who they are to the rest of Southern California. We have a number of guests that are joining us. Next up is Ana Siria Urzua, who is campaign coordinator for Santa Ana Building Healthy Communities. Thank you very much. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Anna, one of the proposals for revitalizing downtown is for a wellness coordinator, the idea that all kinds of things to improve the quality of life for residents in the central part of the city could be developed. Briefly tell us what that entails.
Certainly. The Wellness District Coalition came together from a group of folks in our community that are representatives of nonprofit organizations, neighborhood groups, artists, local businesses, and a number of representatives of the community that, in addition to efforts that had been began several years ago by another partner of ours, Latino Health Access, we wanted to add to those efforts and say the whole downtown can be a wellness district. Why? Because what already works in downtown Santa Ana, what already is effective here in this city, is wellness. That's what draws people from all over the county to Santa Ana, is things that are related to physical health, that are related to whether it's pharmaceutical, music, books, and family time. So we had some.
So this is very broad.
This is broad.
This is not like health centers on every block.
Right. Health is not necessarily the absence of disease. Health is well-being. So what do people need for well-being and wellness? And it's the complete experience. And when you talk to residents and that come to the downtown, when you're able to understand what it is that people come for. It is for that complete experience, for your family time, and for gathering, and for people to be able to have a sense of belonging. So all of those things are important when it comes to community health.
So how would this be engineered? Because there are always going to be skeptics about this, that, it's very difficult. You determine what people say they want, and then you give them that, and people don't necessarily turn out, and it's not economically viable. So what leads you to believe that sort of encouraging this kind of business development is going to lead to financial success for those businesses?
Sure, I can tell you that the work that we do is often backed by a lot of work on the ground with a number of people, and it always through a participatory process. So it's something we've advocated for always, and something we model. To give you a little bit of detail, what the proposal is asking for is to be able to have community serving sites in the downtown that actually would reflect what the local community could see for themselves. What they would identify with in the downtown. So if we had community serving sites, those would serve as anchor locations. And there were some that were already identified in the downtown, whether they were large grocery stores, or some of the community serving locations like the cultural centers that we already have in the downtown. And if we were to add additional points, then we would be able to bring in the local population. What economists will call your first catchment area. You don't have to spend a lot of marketing dollars. You don't have to put in a lot of extra effort in bringing people from so far away if you already have people nearby. So with economic data, we were able to back up how that could be effective and successful. $132 million of untapped money could be brought into the downtown just by serving your local population first.
Okay, this was a study from the California Endowment.
This was a study by The Next Practice, which is a consultant firm from Canada that's internationally recognized, and it was supported by the California Endowment. Yes.
So I bring that up because Cal Endowment, this is just the kind of thing they want to see in communities. So their funding of this, this is the result is very in line with what they would like to see. So,
of course,
so
and I
bring
think this
that
was
up.
about the third study that was done of its kind that doesn't bring up very much different information either. So I'm curious to hear from other folks.
But let me ask, so what do you see as the city's role, policy-wise, in helping make this happen?
Sure, and I do want to mention a couple of things. And I know Ryan has already started or mentioned that some of these things have to do with natural market forces, but because you asked about the city's role is important in protecting vulnerable populations when we know that some of these changes will bring opportunities to some and hardship to others. So the city could have a role in supporting some of these community serving sites by being able to offer some vacant lots that maybe aren't being utilized right now, and helping to create those by helping to create and support those community serving sites. And I can get a little bit more specific.
Yeah, but would these go into, say, businesses that are now, storefronts that are empty right now, or how would you get critical mass for these kinds of businesses and services?
People are already seeking and coming to the downtown for some of these things. I think there are about last month, Latino Health Access had a wellness corridor walk that had about 132 families attend, and they're looking for physical activity, and they're looking for places that they can participate. There are already hundreds of people that are looking for community gardens where they could be active in and grow their food and have more quality ingredients at their tables, and they're already participating in local community gardens. So it's about where are the locations that are underutilized right now that could be used for some of these health and wellness services that people are seeking that they will already buy. So just if I can remember, the $132 million are already getting spent by Santana residents elsewhere. Those 132 million from that study could be captured in our downtown if they were offered. And so some of the proposals we said let's have a micro farm where local residents could have access to quality, healthy, affordable food. And these are residents from our nearby neighborhoods. Let's have a mercadito where they can find the cultural artifacts or the artesanías, the arts and crafts from their hometowns in these places.
And those are things they're buying elsewhere at this point.
And those are things that we can't find right now in our downtown.
We also introduced Hassan Hagani, who is Executive Director of Santa Ana's Planning and Building Agency. Thank you, Hassan. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me here.
How is this playing out at the staff level for people like yourselves in the city as you're hearing these competing voices saying, we're not doing enough for local residents, we're not embracing who we are culturally enough, we're trying to look to attract, dollars more outside the city than serve people here?
I have been here working for the city of Santa Ana for about 3 months, and everything that I have gotten from the city council and from my bosses actually is the opposite. I have been given direction to make room and come up with ways to allow these types of activities to take root and to be economically viable so that they can actually continue for the future. In fact, the city council goes out of their ways. The very first thing that I took to the city council was an ordinance that had nothing to do with all these things, but you would be amazed how much of the city council's attention and focus is on these issues. Thankfully, for all the work that has been done by a lot of people on this panel, that the awareness is there at the city leadership, and the question is, how do we make practical financially possible ways to make these things available. And to the extent that any of the properties that are being discussed are privately owned properties, we have very little control over those, to the extent that the city's resources could be dedicated to those things. The city has shown, and I've been reading the history, taken several steps to make room for these types of activities.
Well, with Gustavo's point is that there's almost kind of cultural shame. He didn't use that, but I'll use that. That sort of, civic leaders don't want to be what Santa Ana is, and that there's a denial.
I take great exception to Gustavo's point about that. I have to tell you that the city, number one, all city council members, the mayor and the 6 city council members here are all Latino. They have great pride on their cultural background and the city's cultural background. And I work with half of my staff, at least half of my staff, are bilingual. And there's a lot of pride in the multi-ethnicity and the melting pot that Santa Ana is. I think everybody in the city's government is aware that this is a melting pot, and we are serving everyone who is a constituent in the city, including undocumented immigrants. That is, in fact, this is the first city I have worked with where the city council, in fact, talks about protecting the well-being of undocumented immigrants, because there is so much respect for that.
Gustavo, you want to respond on this issue?
It's funny because I'm going to say a line that I said a decade ago at the exact same panel. Before it was white people gentrifying Mexicans, now it's Mexicans gentrifying Mexicans. That's progress, right? That's my quip. I will say this. There's a new city manager, David Cavazos. He's not perfect, but he's a much better improvement than the guy that was there before him. I mean, this is like, he reminded me of a baron on a plantation in Mississippi. He was clueless. The current
I miss having you on the show.
I just say the truth.
No one has such colorful description.
But the current city council, I agree with Assam. They are more attuned now than ever before. They're not perfect. I would not call them perfect by any sense of the imagination. And what I was saying, it's not so much that the city itself feels ashamed. The people at City Hall, but they're trying to respond to what the perception is of Santa Ana. They might think Santa Ana is a great city, but the outside doesn't. So they're trying to cater more to people. Say, hey, it's almost like a popularity contest. Hey, I'm popular. Dude, you're already popular, man. You're good.
Right. Alicia Rojas is co-founder of the Santa Ana Community Artists Coalition. Alicia, thank you for being with us. Appreciate it
Gracias,
very
buenas
much.
noches.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Santa Ana, for many years, has had a robust artist community and a very vocal community here in Santa Ana. What's your sense of Santa Ana's ability to be a place where arts and culture, which aren't necessarily profitable, are nurtured versus the desire to bring business in?
The Artist Village got built with redevelopment money, over 10 years ago. The Centora Building of the Arts was the anchor for the Artist Village, and it was federal tax dollars were used to start up that project. The Centora had a contract with the developer at the time, some sort of community binding agreement, if you will, that it had to be occupied 80% by artists, and it also had to serve as a community space, and rents had to be kept at a low rate. Unfortunately, when the contract expired, we have seen many changes in the Artist Village. A lot of displacement has occurred in the Centora since the new building owner, Mr. Jack Jakosky, took over. Unfortunately, it's part of the identity of Santa Ana. Artists were brought in to kind of start shifting a little bit of what the downtown is, but we came in looking for opportunity as well. So I think artists are divided in many senses. We have community artists that try to build community within themselves and try to have community engagement projects with local residents, and then you have artists that are for profit, that are here to excel individually. So we have an array of different artists and different types of goals that each one has. What I did wanted to say, the changes that we have seen, the city in the last couple of years has worked along artists because we have been organizing in order to try to have a voice on the table. And part of that is now we do have an arts commission that just started. So we are looking forward into what the artist's plan is going to be in the next couple of years. There's an arts strategic plan that's being put into place, and there's a steering committee that's being put into place. So those are things that are positive.
How do artists feel, and they're probably all different opinions, but what is the majority sense, if you can discern, of the gentrification of businesses in downtown Santa Ana versus, Calle Cuatro being predominantly Spanish-speaking, local resident serving business street?
Well, like I said, there's many groups of artists that are working in downtown. So you have community artists that do care about La Cuatro and do care about the community. And for example, our organization is focusing on public art because we feel that the community should have a collective say in what their city looks like. It's a participatory process. It's not a one-person process that gets to say what goes on a wall. So it's important for us to be able to have some sort of community engagement process. I know also the Grand Central has been doing a lot of good job in having programs like community centers run by artists to be able to engage the local community. A lot of artists do feel that they have been sort of used throughout the years to boom the downtown, to make it economically viable, and it hasn't been a reciprocal sort of relationship. So I think we're working on that at the moment to try to build, affordable housing for artists and try to be able to stay in the Artist Village. The Artist Village has no artists anymore. It's too high of a rent. We can't even, rent a space in the Centora Arts Building because it's being curated at the moment by someone who doesn't appreciate community artists, who doesn't like the engagement and the activism that used to happen in the Centora. So some of those longtime artists were evicted, or asked to leave, and their leases were not renewed. To bring in new kinds of artists, and this happened about 2 years ago. The Centora is mostly empty. It happens on our walk, but there's probably one gallery that's been there for a while.
All right. Also with us is Mark McLaughlin, who is a very community-involved resident of Santa Ana's Floral Park neighborhood. Thank you so much. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Larry.
Mark, what are you and your fellow residents? Is there a kind of a sense of agreement about the direction you see the city going in, or a lot of disagreement among you and your fellow residents?
Well, we have so many residents, and there's so many people that have diversified opinions on what they would like to see and what they see that's going on downtown. I think that one of the things that we have to look at is that the planning process, Hassan, is a breath of fresh air to come in, because the planning process has really stalled over the last 2 or 3 years. We haven't had really leadership in that area, and now we do. And I think that as we look towards what is going on with Santa Ana, we can't look just at downtown. We have to look at the overall city. We have to understand what's available. We have to look at where we can improve certain areas, and I think that's the focus we have to put in our planning process. And if we do that and we bring in developers, I believe that we will have a significant opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years to make Santa Ana a terrific urban city.
Does it make sense to you that Santa Ana would present itself first and foremost as a Mexican-American community? Is that, do you see value in that as a non-Latino?
I would see some value in it, yes. I mean, there's some value, but I think we have to also look at the fact that when we're trying to develop a city and grow a city that we've got, we have to look at all aspects, all cultures, and everything else. I think that, there's a lot of financial support that's out there, and we need to take advantage of that financial support. We haven't been able to do that. We've been losing businesses and companies. I don't know if people understand, but Ingram Micro, which was a company that's been here for 30, 40 years, is moving to Irvine. Why are they moving to Irvine? Because they don't have the services that they would like to have to support their people during the day. And so we need to look at things like that and realize that there's a section of the city outside of downtown, there's south of Main Street. South of Main Street, we need to improve areas like that, because that's an artery that comes into the city. 70% of the people that come into Santa Ana leave Santa Ana after their jobs are over at the city hall, county, whatever it is. And we need to get people to start to not just leave the city. We need to get people to stay in the city, live in the city, and participate in the city on a regular basis. And we're not doing a good job with that. And it has nothing to do with who it is. It's just a question of how we do it and how we do it better.
All right, we're going to continue our conversation with our guests. We have another one of our panelists to hear from. We have questions as well from members of our audience here at the Discovery Cube in Santa Ana. It's our Central Orange County visit, AirTalk's 30th anniversary tour. Each month we visit a different location. Next month we'll be in Santa Barbara. We hope to see you there. We'll continue with more of our AirTalk 30th anniversary from Santa Ana right after a news update.
You working on anything new? I know you write a few bucks, right?
Just
Okay. All right, I'd like to call you up, those of you that have questions, and we have a number of good ones. Corinne, or is it Corinne? I'm sorry if I mispronounced. Corinne, if you would just come up here, make your way over there, we're going to have you ask a question. Is that you up there? Jesus, are you Jesus Vasquez?
What's your favorite place on the trip? Is there a favorite
Okay.
stopping in?
Thanks, Jesus. Make your way out.
I've heard Waverly's pretty. I've driven through it.
Josh, if you could follow Jesus, please.
My sister went to school in Western Kentucky. So that's
Sam,
yeah. So I drove. My buddy plays in the Bengals fans. I drove from there to Cincinnati. So kind of cruised through it all, but I wish I could have stopped. I've heard great things.
and then two of them are anonymous. Yeah, I'll ask those on behalf. Lauren, how much time do I have?
There's like they're in the middle of nowhere too, right? They're all no, but I mean Louisville, so I'm saying throughout the rest of Kentucky, they're all over.
Yeah, there's community control, community ownership.
You're a big bourbon guy.
Okay, so I'll just follow your cues then.
That's your drink.
Yeah, pero sí menciona que vive en Tenants. Pues sí. En algún momento a veces.
Before we start, we have two more questions. Miguel, if you could step out. And Jose, if you could step out as well, that would be great. And then Lauren, do you need to give these back to them? And I'll keep the anonymous ones. There you go. Thanks. Hey, before we restart, I just want to take a moment. I am incredibly fortunate to work with a wonderful team at KPCC. In doing this for 30 years, the people that come into public radio that do this kind of work are incredibly dedicated. They're people who are smart, they're well educated, they're great team players, and there are a lot of different things that they could do. And public radio is in many ways a labor of love. They're true professionals. And so I just want to ask for your support, please, with applause for our terrific technical team behind me, production team, our team organizing, coming into the space. Because when I'm on the show, you're hearing the tip of the iceberg. It's all these people who make what we do possible. The production team, we have 4 full-time producers, 2 interns who are just dynamite and work so hard to provide for me all the things that I need to do the show. It'd be impossible to do it without them. So thank you, and I hope you keep that in mind when you listen to the show, that there's a whole team of people making it possible. All right, we're going to continue with our 3rd segment of the program. More than likely, then we'll do AirTalk Overtime, which is a web-only component. All right, Dave, we are all set. Okay. From the Discovery Cube in Santa Ana, it's AirTalk's 30th anniversary tour on the road. We're coming your way from Central Orange County, talking about an issue of great importance, not just to Santa Ana, but a lot of different cities. As we see demographic shifts all over Southern California, cities are trying to come to terms with who are we? What do we see as our future? How do we accommodate a population, if it's an immigrant, a population from elsewhere? How do we create a city that's not only good for those living here now, but for their kids and for others that are going to come into the future? We've heard so far just a variety of opinions about how to accomplish this. You get a sense of the scope of the challenge. How do you have businesses that operate profitably, that bring fresh revenue into the city, but don't kick to the curb people that live here and need services and could spend money in the community instead of at big box retailers that are outside Santa Ana? And how do you have something that really embraces what is unique about Santa Ana, which is a community that is almost 80% Latinos, half of the population foreign-born here in Santa Ana. So it is a very unique city here in Southern California. Next up is from Cal State Fullerton, Associate Professor of Chicana and Chicano Studies. He has a book coming out called The Latino City, Urban Revitalization, Politics and the Grassroots, Erwaldo Gonzalez. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being with us. So, give us a sense of history, because for so many of us, even lifelong Southern Californians, we're not certain about the evolution of Santa Ana. Your family goes back here a long time.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Do we have 2 hours for this? A lot of the
It's like that Shakespeare in 60 Minutes, all the plays. That's it.
A lot of the themes that have been brought up actually extend much more than 20 years. The city's been grappling with these questions since the 60s, where the phenomenon of downtown neglect has been going on through a lot of places throughout the United States. In the late 60s, the city of Santa Ana was coming up with questions of what do we do with urban growth? What do we do with the population that is changing here? So in 1974, the Downtown Santa Ana Development Plan was actually the first comprehensive plan that the city started to ask these questions that we're asking today. They didn't start with the Renaissance Plan. They didn't start in 1984, and they didn't start in 1985 when Fiesta Marketplace came up. And the city of Santa Ana has had this the city of Santa Ana has had this preoccupation with appealing to the broader Orange County region because it lost a lot of its white population in the 60s. In 1970, the city of Santa Ana had 40,000 Latinos, a majority Mexican. By 1980, it was 95,000. Whites were also 95,000. So there was a shift in population. Downtown Santa Ana in 1973 started to organically develop where these vacancies that had been there since the 60s started to be taken up by a lot of these business owners that were appealing to the Mexican demographic because of the changes that were going on in Santa Ana. Now, when you look at that plan, 67% of the buildings in the downtown area were seen as uninhabitable. They were deteriorated. and about 23% had seismic deficiencies.
You got a number of century-old buildings there.
Correct, correct. So there was all these assessments going on in 74. Now, a key theme that's been going on since 74 to the present time are the following. There's been a lot of vilifying of the community in the downtown area. So since the 70s and the late 60s, you hear in the city of Santa Ana that the businesses are marginal, their storefronts are not kept up, and they're just not meeting its potential. And you see a social profile in that plan. You see winos and prostitutes generally here, gangs and clubs and cruising. Too much of that was going on Sundays on 4th Street. Minorities generally concentrated on the northeast side, and drug users. So this is a social profile that the city of Santa Ana has been characterizing since 1974. And there's been this whole preoccupation to appeal to the broader Orange County community who has a broader, higher purchasing power. The median income of the broader Orange County was about 2,000 more than the Santa Ana population, which back then in the 70s was significant, not what we could characterize it today. So it's been, how do we bring these people back is what the city of Santa Ana has been grappling with since the 74.
Well, and realistically, I know you're not an economist, but do you think Santa Ana can be viable economically with its retail businesses and hospitality if it doesn't attract from outside the city? You've got a city of more than, 330,000 or more people. If it only relies on its own residents, is it going to be fiscally healthy?
In 2007, the Renaissance plan that came out, which was going to be the most comprehensive plan after the 74 plan, said in there that the downtown area was the second highest tax generator besides Main Place Mall across the street. So when we talk about income and we talk about generation of tax revenues, there's still a lot of debate and it's still fuzzy in the city. Aside from those numbers, you really don't hear it much. If you try to get data, and I hope we could get some, of how much the downtown area has been making, it's very hard to find. I haven't been able to find it. But in 2007, what did we have? We had the recession. And so you start to have arguments that the forces are coming in, that there's vacancies, the market is not there. It depends who you ask. If you go up and down downtown 4th Street, you're not going to find that many vacancies. In 2011, I did a survey of all the businesses. I did 460-some businesses in the catchment area. Of all those 464, I think about 15 had vacancies.
Okay.
That's not a very huge percentage.
But what Ryan Chase was describing is, at least in his properties,
Sure.
was cuts in rent multiple times to try and hold on to tenants, because landlords want to, because it's better to have someone paying less rent and occupying the unit
Sure.
than it is to have the place empty until you can, get someone in there. So if landlords are consistently cutting the rents, eventually time runs out on that, right?
Perhaps, and it would be interesting to survey all of the landlords and all throughout all downtown 4th Street to see what their impressions. I mean, we always hear the narrative of Fiesta Marketplace of that happening, but we never hear the rest of 4th Street. So that would be a good discussion to have, and that I don't have information on.
Ryan,
Sure. I think one thing is really important to note, and I think is a misnomer for some people, is the fact that a lot of the retail businesses downtown are actually owner-operated. And so what the business sales they're doing might not be relevant to how the business actually is doing in terms of they don't have to pay rent. So if you're not paying rent or you're your own landlord, you have a lot more flexibility, if you will, to make the business feasible and survive. I think it's also important to note, again, if you look at even somewhere like Huntington Park or Broadway in downtown LA, which again, were very, very similar to 4th Street. Downtown LA and Broadway now is Ace Hotel, Umami Delicatessen, Urban Outfitters, Gap. I mean, these are regional Latino trade areas that I believe, frankly, are changing all over the country. This is not particular to Santa Ana. This is really a national trend that's happening with urbanization and the millennials coming back and everything else. So I do understand where he's coming from, and again, there's definitely debate about what year it started happening or how dramatic the changes were. But if you go down 4th Street today, there is definitely more vacancy today than there were 7 to 10 years ago.
So then, is there an example of one of these Latino immigrant-focused shopping centers, shopping districts, streets, that continues to be as dynamic as it was 20 years ago? Is there an example?
I'm not personally, frankly, aware of that, but what I'll tell you, I do notice now is you're starting to see shopping centers, not downtowns per se, but shopping centers like, I believe it's Plaza Mexico and Linwood.
Yeah, which is hugely popular.
Correct. But again, it's trending more towards the trends of today with shopping malls and parking lots and again more accessibility.
Yeah, Gustavo,
You do see this in areas and cities with a long-standing Latino population or Mexican American, but that has the financing and the capital to do it. So in Boyle Heights right now, you're having the exact same issue of gentrification. But what's interesting here is that you're having Latinos born and raised in Boyle Heights coming in and saying, hey, you know what? I'm cool. I want to like do things that are going to appeal to me. So they're opening up wine bars like Eastside Love. They're opening up Monarca Bakery. But their justification, they're calling it gentification. Gente being, you know, people, like they're saying, we're down, we're with, with the community, we're from the raza, we're going to work with these longstanding immigrant populations and not just castigate them like, you know, other developers may or other city councils. I think it's funny because it's still gentrification. You could, you know, it's like you could put lipstick on a Mexican pig, but it's still going to be a Mexican pig. You know?
I'd like to add something to that.
Yes,
when it comes
Alicia,
into,
yeah.
There's different developers that work differently, you know, and when we come into the artist village right now, the Santor is a perfect example of having empty gallery spaces for the last 2 years, when there were tenants there that had been paying their rent on time, and you know the owner decided to terminate that lease. So there is gentrification that is going on beyond the economic status of someone being able to stay at their place or not is being curated. And one thing I did want to, just to go off topic a little bit, take an exception with the city regarding the undocumented being a priority in the city. I take big exception to that because we have ICE in Santa Ana that's currently, separating families from Santa Ana. We have a gang injunction that's happening, and those are big community issues that the undocumented community of Santa Ana takes big exception to. So I think there's a big difference from what the local community feels and what the city's actually doing. And artists are involved in a lot of the protests, and that has to do with creating awareness with what's actually really happening in Santa Ana with the separation of families. It's a real issue, and ICE is there, and there's people in there that are being separated. Immigration reform is going to happen. If Santa Ana wants to be progressive with an old city council that's Latino, they got to stop this.
Well, stop what? What are they? Because
have to
I thought that the Santa Ana Police Department was not using ICE detainers and holding people anymore.
Yeah, really quickly, just to give a history.
Yeah.
In the mid-'90s, the Santa Ana City Council applied for a federal grant that they, through I think it was Housing and Urban in the national scope, and they used that money to expand their jail hugely because they thought, hey, we're going to get a whole bunch of criminals. Well, crime rates plummeted, and so to be able to make the rent on that, they got in a contract with ICE to house these people. So you want to talk about bad city policy all in the name of making money, that's as horrible as you can get. Like, all right, we have an empty jail, so let's put a bunch of undocumented folks in there. And so that's what people have been really upset about.
Hassan Haghani, you want to respond to that? from the city?
Where I know is that when we're looking at the housing opportunities ordinance, the city council went through an extensive length to make sure that the way we're formulating this particular ordinance will not put the kind of funding into creating affordable housing that would then require that the residents of affordable housing in the future would have to be either people holding green cards or citizens, so that we would not exclude people who might be undocumented immigrants in the city would be excluded from these affordable housing projects. This, in my 28 years in my career, this is the first time that I see a city council actually stand up and have a discussion about making sure that the funding will not exclude those things. To me, that's an advocacy for the undocumented immigrants in the city.
All right. Yeah. Okay. We need to wrap up, and then I just wanted to mention that we have questions from members of our audience here at the Discovery Cube in Santa Ana. You'll be able to hear that AirTalk Overtime, kpecc.org. We invite you to go to the segment page where you'll be able to hear our questions, and sometimes that's the very best part of the program, when members of the audience are able to ask questions of our panelists that we have on the show. I just want to remind you that we're going to be in Santa Barbara. We'll be there next month for our next Air Talk on the Road, and I hope you'll be joining us there as we talk about desalination, another highly controversial topic. Many environmentalists think it does damage to sea life, it's harmful environmentally, and that the cost to convert the water into drinking water is just simply too high. Many people say because we're in the midst of historic drought, we need to look at this technology and to support it. Santa Barbara has a plant. It's ready to restart. So we'll be up there. We'll be talking about that next month. And of course, we also remind you, you can tweet about any of our conversations on these AirTalk on the roads using the hashtag AT30 to have a conversation with your fellow listeners about what you heard. Stay tuned next. Coming up, it's BBC NewsHour here on 89.3, but I invite you to go to the web to listen to AirTalk over time with more of our program, with our panel, and our audience questions. We'll be back with you tomorrow morning at 11 for the next AirTalk here on KPCC. All right, now we're going to get to the questions from members of our audience. Dave, are we still rolling? Okay. Your first name and what city you're from, please, and your question.
Corinne, and I live here in Santa Ana. I've been here since 2002 and a resident of the downtown since 2008. So as a relatively new resident of Santa Ana, something that I'm always grappling with is, on one hand, the cultural identity of the city is what brought me to it. On the other hand, you can't help but feel a little bit like an outsider. And so the question really is, how do we balance the cultural identity that's bringing people in and also creating a culture that embraces newcomers and gets away from the us versus them dynamic that seems to kind of dominate a lot of the discussion?
Well, for you, let me just ask you, do you feel welcome in the city? Do you feel like the city is for you?
On an individual basis, yes. I love my neighbors and we get along. I speak Spanish, so from that perspective, I get along really well. Sometimes when people talk about residents of Santa Ana, I'm not included in that group. When they talk about services for residents of Santa Ana, then it's, then I'm kind of excluded from it. So I think it really kind of depends. I love the city, and I think that they're going to figure out a way to balance those things out. And I have the services that I love, but I also really appreciate, we have Northgate Market that has plenty of culturally, Hispanic foods and things that people really enjoy. So I feel like the city is still doing a good job of addressing the needs of all of its residents.
All right. Who wants to weigh in? Anna, you want to? Yeah.
Yes, please. I think that's a great question. And it's definitely important that you acknowledge that the things that you felt brought you here, right? And that the cultural identity of this city is important to preserve. It's really important to have allies that recognize that. And also to be able to speak for what needs to back up the ability for those residents that to also have a voice in that same sense of safety and opportunities in their community is for the policies to be able to back up. Just like the city representative today said, and as Alicia pointed out, we need to be able to have policies that that also support the existing community. So so for you to be able to be a part, to come in and feel and be a part and feel welcome is to be able to recognize also how there needs to be power behind existing community residents and a combination of that brings opportunities to everybody.
Let me just ask a follow-up question. I live in a community that's extremely diverse. I live on a street with people from every background imaginable, and I love that. I love that diversity. Do any of you feel like you wish Santa Ana was more diverse, that it had a higher Asian American population, more Armenians, that it had more languages that are spoken on the street, that it had a wider socioeconomic group? Or do you feel like, no, what it is, this is better?
Well, I think some of the responses to that would be, well, aren't we diverse enough?
Well, at 80% Latino, that's pretty...
Well, diverse enough, it's like, what do we mean by diversity? Right, so we get into this whole issue about exclusionary,
mixed is what
exclusionary or inclusive, and I think that's the debate. I think that's the whole debate that's being raised when you have city pushing for redevelopment that caters to double income, no kids, empty nesters populations. That in itself is reimagining what you mean or what you want to attract. And so in itself, there's an issue with the existing community, which is 80%. So you're saying, well, if you have an 80% community that has a certain profile, we want to reconfigure it to what we think should be diversity.
Well, I think
so-
we're what residents. If residents really feel like, no, I want to live with other people, that's my preference, and I don't want people that are different or not above a certain percentage, then
I think that's a great point. I think, that's why you have strategic planning processes that the city just went through a couple of, not too long ago, about 2 years ago, to have these type of discussions. Where should a city be going? And I think when you have residents come together and different stakeholders come together and ask those questions, and if there's an avenue to do that, then that's where you find out, well, what will diversity look like? But when you have the city making the decisions in terms of where the city, what I mean by that is having loft development, having subsidies for redevelopment that just caters to a particular population, and the broader community in Santa Ana is not involved in making those decisions, then the question becomes, does the city, as stakeholders and elected officials and developers, should they be defining what diversity is, or should we have a more inclusive process?
Gani.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of assumption in what you're saying that says the city assumes a particular kind of clientele or residents that we want to attract. Actually, that couldn't be further from the truth. Every city in California has to operate from an economic standpoint to make sure that the standard of living in the city is raised. No matter what your ethnic background, you want to raise the standard of living for yourself and for your children. And that is one of the most important guiding principles that every city government follows. So if it so happens that the new development that attracts income and investment into the city happens to be a certain type of housing, well, that's what the market builds. That's not necessarily what the city dictates or the city prefers. The city wants economic activity so that we can not only compete but do better than our surrounding cities, because every city is a corporation in the end. We need to survive. We need to grow our economy. We need to make everything better for our constituents, regardless of their background. And if it so happens that the demographics change because of that, that is part of the natural process of this. At the same time, this city is taking steps to make sure that the displacement and minimalization of the existing community is out of the picture, and they're addressing it at every level that they possibly can.
Larry, I don't think there's anything natural about gentrification.
You don't.
No, gentrification is engineered. And so Gustavo, his characterization talks about the consumer. If you focus on the consumer, well, why don't we focus on the producers? Who is driving the type of development? So we get so fixated on the consumers. Well, the consumers are going to come after the production is done to create this market. Does that make sense? So creating loft development, that's one prime example that you're targeting a specific demographic.
So what
Having
kind
a
of
central
development
management district that allocates resources for particular types of events, that is city involvement.
Okay,
With that, yeah.
but if you're looking at bringing revenue into the city, so what would that, if it's not, we know that lofts and this kind of mixed use stuff is, every it's the flavor, right?
Sure.
So what would be another flavor? What would be something else that people are hot to buy or to rent that we see evidenced in the marketplace that Santa Ana could do instead of that?
Or give it a CBA.
Exactly, tamales.
Yes.
That's a good response.
So there'd be enough tamale sales that you would. Okay, I love tamales, but you got to eat a lot of tamales.
I think also if you look at the makeup of the loft owners, I would think it's actually more diverse than one would perceive. I think if you really think about it, again, generationally, they might be different. They might not be the immigrant base that was here before, but they're artists. They're like everyone else, and I think it's very. I don't think it's accurate to per se that it's the outsiders that are buying lofts and everyone else is living in squander. I don't think that's accurate.
Gustavo, quick comment in the back.
I was going to say that yes, when you're displacing people, it's not the rich that are being displaced or the middle class. It's working class folks. It's undocumented folks, and it's mostly Mexican people. So it's very intercorrelated. And really quickly, Santa Ana is very diverse. We have a lot of Mexicans from Oaxaca, from Yucatan, from Sinaloa, and a hell of a lot of Chilangos.
All right, very good. I don't think that go over so well with white people. We have a lot of Germans, Irish, we got a lot of
Beautiful
French.
people.
We got
My mom's
don't
whiter than
think
anyone
that
in this
would
room.
quite fly. Okay, yes, sir, your first name and where are you from, please?
Hi, I'm Jesus, and I'm from Santa Ana, and I've lived here for over 20 years, and I'm a first-generation Mexican. And my question is, how does Santa Ana compare to other cultural destinations such as Chinatown, Little Tokyo, and how much does that have to do with the fact that it's representative of a culture that is from the southern border that is so close, and it's not seen as I forgot the word.
Exotic enough? Is that what you're trying?
Novelty.
Novel, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Who wants to respond?
Well, I mean, I would say, for me, the great example is San Antonio. San Antonio has, I'm not going to sing right now. I was going to do Flaco Jimenez. But, no, San Antonio, going back to the days
my
of Mark.
accordion.
Yeah, going back to the days of Mark Twain, it was already a Hispanic city. I think Mark Twain said there was 4 great American cities with, like, its own unique culture. New Orleans, Boston, San Francisco, and San Antonio. And San Antonio, of course, it's a majority Mexican city. A lot of Mexicans there, and they're proud of their culture. They're proud of their Tejano culture. They've been proud of their culture for a long, long time. Is it a perfect city? Is it all-encompassing? And do they say we're 100% Mexican? No, they're able to work with all the different cultures that they have. And if you know San Antonio, long-standing German community, long-standing, I think, Polish community, Jewish community, they've been able to work it out. On the other hand, San Antonio's been around with this multicultural essence for 150 years. Santana, really, I would honestly say is only finally embracing this idea, okay, let's be somewhat content with who we are. Because Eduardo earlier talked about, like, there's been this issue that the city has had with the downtown. I once did a story for the OC Weekly about, there's this idea, like, if you see on media, oh, Santa Ana, downtown Santa Ana is experiencing a renaissance. It used to be bad, but now it's good. So I track this train of thought. If you go back, they were saying this in the 80s, in the 70s, this idea that it's now bad. According to those people who have that train of thought, downtown Santa Ana was awesome and wonderful and everything was hunky-dory in the 1950s. Well, what do we have in the 1950s? Segregation. A lot of segregation. You have segregation in the downtown. So whenever I hear people, let's take Santana back to the old days, it makes me worried. It really does. But but there's hope. There is absolute hope.
Yeah. All right. Yes, sir. Your first name, please, and where are you from?
Josh, I'm from all over Orange County, born and raised. There was a time where I wasn't living in Orange County. It was San Francisco. Gustavo mentioned it. And Mr. Chase, you mentioned also several different locations and examples. I guess I'm going to state one more. There was the gentrification of the Mission District in San Francisco. Yes. And it was, I consider, a successful gentrification, in my opinion. It was, it kept its culture. It stayed alive. There's murals, tourism's up, and there's a diverse population there. Could you apply the lessons there to the lessons here?
I would like to comment on that.
Yes, Alicia.
Actually, the Mission's going through a big transition of gentrification and losing affordable housing for the Latino community that's been there for the last 20 years, and artists as well. And I think the city of San Francisco is finally waking up to how do we balance this diversity, right? I don't think you come in and have to displace everybody that's been there. You have to come up with a model that has to be in a partnership with the city to be able to keep these cultural heritage that started from, because rents are going high in Santa Ana, just as the same as it went into the Mission. About 3 weeks ago, the San Francisco created a program, the Small Sites program, and that's actually them trying to go buy buildings from developers that are evicting people and creating a partnership with nonprofits to keep rent control and to keep, working class families that have been there for 20 years and also keep artists. So we have to really think outside the box about what community really means and displacement really means. And if you're coming as a new person, that's great. We want a new community to be, but we have to build partnerships and we have to have the city be in policy. The city is us. We elect them. We are the government. So we have to hold them responsible into creating a partnership to keep rents affordable.
Hassan, you wanted to comment?
Yes, actually, a lot of what has happened in San Francisco may not easily be transferable in Santa Ana. In San Francisco, you have to work hard to keep investors out of the city. People want to be there, they want to invest there, and that is actually putting gentrification on a very, very high speed and on force. So the city has, in the past, relied on policies such as rent control and such as displacement strategies to really make it very expensive for developers to displace people. In Santa Ana, we're still fighting to attract investment. We're still competing very hard to keep up with our surrounding cities to attract investment and raise property values and raise economic opportunities for the city.
All right, Anna?
Yeah, I would add a concern about the Latinoization without the Latino community there. So, and I would add that that's a concern for here for Santa Ana too. So if San Francisco has kept its at least at face value, its culture and its what it would attract people to, but it's too expensive for people to afford. What could be something that we could have here in Santa Ana, where I definitely see people now embracing the Latino identity. I see a lot of that in the marketing. Yeah. But what the difference will be is if we have property owners, if we have the community being able to, if we have the Latino community and the immigrant community being able to also be the owners of businesses and properties in increasing numbers, and if we have strategies such as community benefits agreements for some of these development opportunities, but where there are actual community benefits that have a legally binding contract with the community, then we would be able to see not just at face value, but actually for those benefits to translate to.
But the challenge, of course, is getting developers to buy on, to sign on, to do something like that, right?
Yeah, I think this is the economic reality speaks for itself, and we have to deal with the market forces on the ground. And unfortunately, as Hassan alluded to, we're not getting investment in the city, at least at the numbers we think we should be getting at. They're going to Irvine, they're going to Anaheim, they're going to Costa Mesa. We're being left in the dust. And I guess the question becomes is, what do we want for the city? Do we want to be left behind, or do we want more investment coming? And so I think we have to be very careful, and there's no question there's a balance, but of what development community wants and what the community wants and how that all works. I mean, the reality is we all want affordable housing. It's very expensive to live in the city. It's very expensive to live in this county. But again, if developers aren't coming because of that affordable complexity, what do we want to do? And so again, there has to be, I think we have to be open-minded to the fact that we're going to have to be very creative in how we structure deals. And I think, again, the market speaks for itself. And if people aren't coming because of these parameters we're putting up or these roadblocks we're putting up, we have to look at what we can do as a city to help encourage that investment. Because at the end of the day, if we continue to invest in the city, it's going to raise all tides.
Larry, can I say I heard this before, and this was about 4 years ago, or the last time you came by for the last radio show, and we heard this during a CBA fight with a development project by Related. It's a company that did do an affordable housing development complex, but we were told time and time again that if we asked for a legally binding contract, that they would leave, and that we needed this development, and that we couldn't put that at risk, and so we didn't get a community benefits agreement, and yet that same company was sued in order to preserve historical homes, and they didn't go anywhere. So I don't think necessarily that that development won't come if there are these demands, if there are these minimal benefits asked for, or that they're going to go anywhere because they stayed and they continue to develop their project, and that project exists today.
Yeah, right.
The reality is how many projects are happening in Santa Ana right now. I mean, it kind of speaks for itself. You go to Irvine, you go to Costa Mesa, you go to Anaheim, they're building. We're not. I mean, again, I'm in the development community all the time. I talk to people from every walk of life, every Irvine company down, and the reality is they don't want to do business here because of the complexities of that. And again, it's market forces. I think we have to react to what the reality on the ground is. We have a very short window now with the economy as strong as it is, at least from a financing standpoint. And if we miss that window, it could be another 10 to 15 years before we're able to get developers back here. And so, again, I think we have to value and weigh. Again, I'm not saying we just do whatever developers want, but we also have to look at, again, what the market dictates. And at the end of the day, supply and demand, it's market forces, it's capitalism. We have to react to that.
I understand, but do you think there's some companies, though, that have a kind of societal consciousness to where they're looking for projects where they're going to go in?
I would say.
Or what's our city?
Is that so naive to think that there would be companies?
Let me just interject real quickly. I wouldn't say so much. Irvine company, Don Bren has no soul. We do not want Don Bren in Santa Ana.
He's not here to defend himself.
Look, he would agree to that. I think the important thing, here's the important thing, and this is where CBAs definitely can work, is that there's this idea from people that, oh, just because we're opposed to development, somehow we all want to live in one big commune or not. No, you want to develop businesses that are invested in the area. The last thing Santana needs is to have people who come here because it's cool, and then when it's no longer cool, they go off to other places. You want people that are going to stay here. They're committed for the long run, 20 years, 30 years. They're not going to jump from place to place to place to place. And more often than not, that the people who are going to have that connection are those lifelong residents or people who understand the city. That's where...
Or their kids.
Yeah, or their kids. And that's always been my fear. And it's not just a Santana issue. This is also in Anaheim. This is anywhere that's now suddenly hip. If you try to attract all these outsider cool people with hip restaurants and this and that, okay, that's fine. They'll give you some money for the short term. But if you're not addressing people who are, if you're not bringing in people who are there for the long term, and you're not addressing the immediate residents of the community, you could, as Ryan said, you could be left in the dust. And then, look at malls nowadays. Malls, they stood 20, 30 years. Now they're irrelevant. The last thing a city needs is to get tenants that are going to leave the city irrelevant.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm just trying to picture communities where this has happened, where the gentrification has occurred and the bottom has fallen out of that.
Well, Boyle Heights, to me, is a really fascinating example. I think that's where, ideally, if Santana is going to carry on this gentrification track, at least in Boyle Heights, you do have people who are conscious of it. So they're the type of people who sell you a $6 espresso and have a sign that says, "Stop gentrification in Boyle Heights." And they're Latino.
Yes, sir. Your first name, where are you from?
My name is Sam, and first and foremost, Larry, thank you for having us. As a resident of Pomona, I usually come to Santa Ana because I gravitate towards the downtown scene. My question is, does gentrification connect or disconnect the second or third generation people of immigrant families from their respective cultures? And,
yeah, it's an excellent question. And with second generation that are probably a far more multicultural experience than their parents had who immigrated here to the U.S. Who wants to respond to that, the multi-generational appeal?
I mean, I don't want to dominate this, but just I'll be very, very succinct. The reality is, and Ryan knows this more because he's the landlord, you have a lot of second and third generation people who are going to the downtown area, and they're happy. They are happy. I do not agree necessarily with their happiness of that, but they are happy. They're like,
but they have no right to happiness.
No.
That's constitutional.
Maybe it's the old commie in me, but they're like, oh, I don't care about gentrification. I think this is cool. And I would have to say it's not just the second and third generation. My dad, he came to Santana in the mid 1970s. He lived off the Standard in McFadden, and he comes here a lot for Dia de los Muertos, and he'll tell me like, oh, this area is much nicer now. But he says, I miss the old days. And for me, the old days, you'd go from cantina to cantina to cantina. And here's the funny thing, though. Now, those cantinas are done, but there's still a lot of bars. They're hipster bars. Right. I'm at those bars a lot, so don't get at me for that. But, but now that's somehow acceptable. Back in the days, it wasn't. Yeah. So it's far more complicated than either side would ever want to admit.
I just have one comment. I think it's really important to add, too. I think, frankly, a lot of the community itself doesn't even know what gentrification is. I mean, I had my market manager at Forestry Market over here, 2 Latino kids talking about, well, if this is gentrification, bring more of it. So I think, the reality is I don't think a lot of people even know what it means and the impacts they're even having. And I think, again, the dialogue that we're having today and that we've been having over the last few years, I think is productive and progressive towards trying to get people on the same page and finding things that we can have common ground with. For example, Latino Health Access and I have different viewpoints on certain things, but there's one thing we can agree on is we want to help the youth in the community. So we're both talking about trying to do a skate park together because, again, they want a skate park, I want a skate park, it serves the community together. There's nothing we can disagree about that, so let's try to work on it. So again, we're trying to find middle ground where we can bridge the gap, and the reality is we're not going to agree on everything.
But that young person, that you ask someone whose, aunt might have lost her shop, and, he's been going there since he was a kid, and she can't afford the rent, it might have been a different story,
no
though,
question.
too.
No question about it.
Some people get conscious, others don't.
Sure, going back to the theme of tonight's panel, this whole idea of authenticity. And I think that is something that Gustavo alluded to. And I think a lot of community members, a lot of the businesses on La Cuatro, Calle Cuatro, there's issue with the whole revitalization that's going on and the dollars that are going into that because, again, since the 70s, the merchants there have sustained the area. They have sustained the downtown area since, and it's been done relatively organically, meaning no city intervention. Of course, they fixed the road from Main to Broadway, but not no
Hey,
specific.
that's more than LA does. So.
Right. but it's not a specific intervention like Fiesta Marketplace on the east side. That was the only pretense of Mexican inclusion in the downtown area in 1985. But so what's going on with this whole idea of authenticity is that you have a downtown area like Cuatro that's been existing, that started coming to about since the 70s, since 73. And now you have all these types of redevelopment, putting a lot of different dollars and saying, wait a minute, what's going on around us? Why hasn't there been similar redevelopment dollars funneled into the downtown area to maintain these businesses? So that is an issue.
I just want to say one thing. I mean, when you talk about redevelopment dollars, I'm not sure, but the last time I heard, redevelopment stopped about 4 years ago. And so there's no redevelopment dollars that are left. At this point in time, there's no redevelopment dollars.
The Artist Village in
Redevelopment
1994,
dollars have already
Station
been
District
spent.
is what I
Those have
mean.
already been spent. But at this point in time, from a redevelopment perspective, we have to look at development dollars. We have to look at opportunities for development. And what's happening is there are a lot of developers out there that would like to work with us. And before Hassan came on board, in reality, the process of getting through planning was agonizing, painful, and now we're looking at that. Organizations are working on trying to reduce that plan. If you look at Anaheim put a process together about 2 years ago, and their development process is incredibly easy to go through. And they're getting businesses to come in. They're getting people to build homes and build affordable homes. It's all based on the process and the money.
And they're subsidizing like crazy, and
Exactly.
they're driving out a lot of working class people.
And if
there.
this increases displacement, then yes, we will definitely not be able to be connected to our culture.
So, but it's catch-22, right? If you've got a lower income community and you need additional dollars to come in to provide more services for people living in the low income community, but those additional
can you
dollars coming
ensure
in
that
displace some of those people who, I mean,
Will
it's all a trade-off.
Will those dollars reach all of the community? I
Well,
think we're expecting that will somehow
Yeah.
benefit everybody, but how can we be sure that all people will benefit from
Is
this
that
growth
even
and
possible?
development?
Is that a realistic? You're talking about kind of no trade-offs? You're saying we want to get this investment to come into the community. We don't want anyone to be displaced. We want everybody's standard of living, their life to be improved. But we don't want to change anything. But we want the money. Is that possible?
We want better
is. So-
neighborhoods, but we don't want displacement.
What is a good example of where this has worked?
I think that there are important policies. I think you all mentioned some of them already, like rent control. Like there are things like community ownership of property as well, where then you can offset that because there are also opportunities being created by populations that have the least access.
But
in
where
these places. There are places
what's the
in
working model of that?
there are places in Los Angeles that are doing this. There are places in Madison, Wisconsin has definitely
Revel Sims.
cooperatives is essential for worker cooperatives and housing cooperatives. There are places in East LA. I guess you're mentioning.
So you're talking about small scale kinds of. You're not talking about something that's
mid-sized
a larger.
cities like Santa.
No, but I mean the projects are small scale. You're talking about.
Sure, but we need to begin with some of those. Those are going to be long-term solutions.
Okay, Hassan.
Well, I think that there's a lot of conversation about redevelopment, and Mark is right on the money. Redevelopment was a very specific law in California that was abolished about 4 years ago. And to the extent that any of these studies identified an area like downtown Santa Ana as a place that you would have to do blight studies. You'd have to prove that an area is blighted so that you could have a piece of the pie to reinvest into the city. That's what the city did. You cannot find any city in California that had a redevelopment area that did not have a similar study. It happened to be in an area where Latinos lived here. In other cities, it may be some other ethnic group or maybe completely Caucasian. We cannot forget the economics and the laws that govern us and how we need to maximize the benefit to the community economically, and that's what the city has done.
So yeah. Oh yes, Walter, do you have a quick comment? Or okay, let's take. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Miguel. I live in Santa Ana. I wanted to thank you for having that discussion and bringing the topic to light. I wanted to touch base a little bit on Mark's comments that he mentioned earlier. I'm one of the people that live in the city. I went away for school, came back. And I'm one of those that are being displaced. I can't afford to live in Santa Ana. Forbes.com just recently released a study. We're the 19th most expensive city to live in the U.S. And for someone that can't afford here, what is the city? What's what can the city do to help those that are being? I wouldn't say necessarily. I'm not being pushed out through the business side, but I'm being pushed out because I can't afford to live in the city.
And this is the story. What you're experiencing here in Santa Ana is happening in city after city in Southern California and Pasadena, where we are at KPCC. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to said, my now grown kids cannot afford to live here. They're living in the Inland Empire. They grew up here, went to school here, and cannot stay in the community. This is a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, we have to buy in Corona. So, I mean, I have an offer out there, and I have to move away and then commute over here because the business is here.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a tough thing to manage. But, I mean, I have to leave my beautiful city that I love to just be able to afford something that's worth living in and buying.
Well, you're speaking for a lot of people. Who'd like to respond to
I will have a
Hassan.
stab at it. One of the issues that we're grappling with in Santa Ana is to provide a variety of housing types. And mind you, any new development that is going to happen in urban California has to be multifamily. The days of single-family homes with backyards are gone. We don't have that raw land to do that. So one of the obstacles we have in attracting development to give a variety of housing types so that a single parent with kids, a nurse, or even a teacher can afford to buy that is to attract development here. But we have put so many obstacles for development that developers are, in fact, not coming to Santa Ana so that we can provide medium income affordable housing types or that you could afford to live in here. We cannot attract that kind of development at this point. And as we add more obstacles and requirements, developers are going to go to the path of least resistance, and they're going to avoid us.
But if you don't add requirements for some sense of sensitivity to the community here, then what's to keep the new developments from setting up a wedge between the established community and the new developments?
And we have put in it. We have right now one of the most demanding inclusionary housing requirements in Orange County. We are putting those in, and we are trying to market Santa Ana to the developers to say that the inclusionary housing, which says 15% of the housing needs to be set aside for.
Do they have to do it on site, or can they pay?
We are providing options for them to do it on site or off site so that they will not avoid us.
But are the off-site units really getting built? Because there are a number of cities that have the payments in lieu of providing the lower cost housing, and those units don't get built. Are they being built here?
Well, at this moment, we're still having that discussion with the council. If you watch at the next city council meeting, we're continuing that discussion. They're not being built, and we haven't been able to attract a lot of money to build them at this point. But we are looking to see what the obstacles are that the developers are not coming.
Okay. And we have one more. Yes, sir?
Hello, I'm Jose. I'm a resident of Santa Ana for 10 years now. And I'm one of those people who you mentioned who actually sees the gentrification as a good thing in a certain way, with the cleaning up the city, helping improve our image. My question is, do you see this gentrification as an opportunity to expose non-locals to all the diversity Santa Ana offers? You know, you can start having drinks at Chapter 1 with farm to table food and then go to Rancho Mendoza and listen to some banda and see some Mexican soccer on the TV. But you got to know, So do you see these opportunities there?
Sounds like you may have a marketing job that's coming out of this tonight. Ana?
My concern is with the cleaning up part of it and thinking that because we're moving people out, then Santa Ana is better. So.
And to the point, this has been going on for decades, this whole issue. So if you are a resident in the city and you constantly hear, we want to clean it up, it's not good, it's not meeting its potential, you wouldn't want to hear that. You're not meeting your potential. We want to clean you up. And so when you have that type of discourse that's been entrenched in the city, of course you're going to have activist residents take issue with it. And I think that is something that when we talk about identity and authenticity, we're saying what's there is not good. We need to somehow recast
But every
it.
city can be improved.
Most
Every
definitely.
city can.
And I think the issues that we've been talking about today is, do you have to equate improvement with displacement? Do you have to equate improvement with having people not be able to live where you live? Are you gonna, is improvement mean that an area that has historically marketed and been having a base of a working class immigrant population, and they're slowly gonna be pushed out, does that mean improvement? So I think improvement, like anything, like redevelopment is a positive term. No one can really argue against that because you've been seen like as a devil, right? So the question is the ones that we're having today, and it's a very contentious debate, and that's why we have these strategic planning processes. That's why the community has to fight to get into the decisions that are happening in City Hall. And it's not an easy process, but this whole issue about that was just brought up, I think that is also at the core of a lot of these questions that don't get discussed.
Gustavo.
Rhetoric is incredibly important. This idea of cleaning up and all that, that is what the lifelong residents do not want to hear. That is a direct insult to the city that they have been in 2 to 3 generations. And the best example is right there on 4th Street, all the quinceañera shops. There has been so much trash talked on those quinceañera shops online, chattering all over, people saying, why are there so many quinceañera shops? Wouldn't it be so much better if that quinceañera shop was a Pilates store, blah, blah, blah. So much to the extent, we bring up Chapter 1. God bless Chapter 1. But, a couple years ago, there was a city council meeting over, this might get too much in the woods, over a P-bid, which, we could talk about later. But one of the owners of Chapter 1 at the time, he went up to the city council and said, to all those quinceañera shops out there, you have to change. Like, we need more diversity. Who on earth wants to hear that? And more importantly, what bothers him so much about quinceañera shops? What bothers these people about quinceañera shops? And a lot of people, of course, people are going to be upset. But, and a lot of people started boycotting Chapter 1 and whatnot. Now, and the most important thing, especially since
No
there's
quinceañeras were booked in the banquet.
Red Room didn't exist back then. But here's the important thing, and this is where all of us as Santaneros and all that can have that dialogue, because people did not talk at all about, or did not go to Chapter 1, especially activists and whatnot. Eventually, that guy, there was 3 owners. That guy left. The other owners apologized openly. And so what happened this past Sunday, one of the owners, Jeff Jarvis, native of Santana, he opened up another place called C4, which is an awesome place. That's where I'm going to be after this, so if you want to talk. But he allowed...
Said no product placement.
Oh, I say C4 because this past Sunday, there was a pop-up restaurant by Ben Vasquez, who's right here, a teacher, lifelong resident of Santana, and it was hipster food, but it was reasonably priced, and it was absolutely packed.
They could do it at a quinceañera shop.
At a quinceañera, too. So from being reviled as a gentrifier to being now accepted as a member of the community, rapprochement is absolutely possible. But the most important thing is to not use that, that type of nasty rhetoric, because nasty rhetoric will never win.
I need to wrap up. I want to thank you all so much. This was great. Thank you. Gustavo Arellano, Ryan Chase, Eduardo Gonzalez, Hassan Hagani, Mark McLaughlin, Alicia Rojas, Ana Siria Uzua. And thank you for coming out this evening. I learned so much about Santa Ana. Every time I come, I learn more about this city. And it was challenging. It was fun. It's important and serious business of the city. And those of us who don't live here wish you all very well in the future, the growth, and the success of people who live and work here. Thank you for coming out. I'll stick around for a little bit if you want to come up and say hi. And for all of you listening on AirTalk Overtime, kpcc.org, thank you so much. Of course, we're on every Monday through Friday, 11 to 1 on 89.3 KPCC.